Our Indian Constitution has often been described as, or the state as envisaged, has been described as a unitary state with a strong federal bias. There are others who describe it exactly the opposite way, as a federal state with a strong unitary bias. Now that is up in the air, but what we do know is that for the last decade, what we see is the aggrandizement of the center on the turf of the states, on the powers, the rights of the states. And a very obvious or in-your-face example of that is the way governors, particularly in the opposition states or some of the opposition states, behave, the gubernatorial excesses that we have seen. Governors have begun to behave like viceroys, and they sit on bills, and when they can't sit on it anymore, they push it up. In other words, the will of the legislature, expressed on the floor of the legislature, is not allowed to be realized. We have seen in various realms, in education, for instance, which at one point, through an amendment, as you know, became part of the concurrent list, but there's hardly any concurrence in the way education is being planned or the policy in terms of the new education policy is being envisaged. We know what's happening to school textbooks. It's increasingly narrowly ideologized. We know the big fiasco that has gone on in the name of NEET. Tamil Nadu has been consistently opposing that. And so in various realms, we find this whole problem of an aggrandizing center. Of course, the center plank of this whole problem is the fiscal relations between the center and the state, and that is what is going to be addressed today by our speaker, Dr. Thomas Issac, who of course is too well known to be introduced, but Venkatesh Atreya, who will be presiding over the function, over the event, will do that in some measure. Dr. Thomas Issac is a former finance minister of Kerala. He is a well-known economist even before that, and continues to be one even after that. So he will be speaking to this issue of union-state fiscal relations in India, challenges and the way forward. The way it's structured is that he'll speak for about 40 or 45 minutes, and then there'll be some time for interaction with all of you. So without further ado, but before we have Dr. Thomas Issac, I'm going to request Mr. N. Ram, trustee of the Media Development Foundation, to say a few words by way of introductory remarks, and then Dr. Venkatesh Atreya, who is an adjunct, who in his own right is a well-known economist and an adjunct professor here at the Asian College of Journalism, to take over and preside over the function. We also have with us, let me also welcome Mr. Nagaraj, who represents the Bharati Puttagalayam, who are organizing this event along with the ACJ. A warm welcome to our special guests today. We have many of them, Mr. Rangarajan, Mr. G. Ramakrishnan, many others. I don't want to start naming them. Our visitors, students of the ACJ. I think we'll have more visitors as the evening proceeds because many of them have to come here after a work day, and therefore, given the traffic conditions, they may walk in a little late, but I hope they'll all arrive before we have the keynote speaker. I now invite Mr. N. Ram to say a few words by way of introduction, and then Dr. Venkatesh Atreya to take over the proceedings. Thank you.
Thank you, Sashi. I think this is an important subject, and people who have the experience and mastery of the technical details of union-state fiscal relations as they have been and as they are. I think we'll greatly look forward to their remarks and presentation, in particular by Thomas Issac, former Finance Minister of Kerala. I want to place this in a wider context. The attack on democratic institutions, and part of the attack is an attack on the opposition-ruled states, not just the government, but directly or indirectly also on the people of those states, several southern states in particular. And Tamil Nadu, I think, is at the heart of this confrontation, where, as Shashi Kumar has said, governors are brought in. Governors have misbehaved before. We've seen the use of Article 356 on many occasions, including in the state, to dismiss or trouble the elected state governments, dismiss in the case of Article 356. But there is a new form of attack on opposition-ruled states and denying them adequate finances for development, finances that they are entitled to, is part of this game that a government which has taken the path of incremental authoritarianism, softening up and wherever possible, suborning constitutional and democratic institutions, undermining India's already stressed secular foundations. This is the path this government has been taken. And the federalism, which has been recognized to be part of, or quasi-federalism at any rate, which has been recognized to be a part of the basic features or basic structure of the Indian Constitution by the Supreme Court, is also part of the, is also being attacked as part of this rising authoritarianism. Of course, after the election, the last general election, the ground has shifted under Mr. Modi, Prime Minister Modi's feet, and several cracks have opened up. We can't be complacent. At the same time, we have to recognize that this authoritarian government is in a much weaker position because of the sheer numbers of the Lok Sabha and also the changes that have taken place. Underlying these numbers, I think they are in a much weaker position, so there are many opportunities for progressive, democratic, popular forces, left forces, to take the offensive in particular areas as part of coalitions and so on. The actions that I just called to mind, the government has brought executive power to bear on the independence of two constitutionally empowered institutions, the Election Commission and the Supreme Court. In the assessment of some critical lawyers, the Supreme Court, there's an attempt to turn it into an executive court. The finance commissions have also been ignored, and their recommendations have been defied by the union government. In all fairness, I must point out that this process has taken place not just during this government, but during the earlier Congress-led governments. The Congress party is complicit in weakening the foundations of what federalism, what measure of federalism has been provided in the Indian Constitution. We have to be absolutely clear about that. But this authoritarian attacks represent a new game. The Modi government has targeted, I don't want to go into the details, assaults on targeted freedom of expression, media freedom, media independence, and other fundamental rights. And it has brought in draconian laws to incarcerate journalists, students, human rights defenders, civil society activists, and troublesome critics of the government, and incarcerate them or put them behind bars for prolonged periods without bail or trial. And everybody knows that India has sunk to the to a very low rank among, in the index compiled by Reporters Without Borders, the World Press Freedom Index. There are various other attacks, illegal surveillance against a large number of journalists, politicians, civil society activists, and others. And also, the government has made a concerted effort to police and censor the internet, social media, streamlining platforms such as Netflix, and it's really on that path. It's getting worse. It has amended the citizenship law to make Muslims, as distinct from non-Muslims from Bangladesh, Afghanistan, and Pakistan, ineligible for citizenship. I don't have to go into the details. It's deployed brutal force to suppress democratic protests, notably demonstrations in December 2019 against the changes in the citizenship law that discriminate against Muslims, and then in 2020 and 21, those who demanded the repeal of the 3 anti-farmer laws. It has systematically, and this is where we come to the subject, misused agencies of the state for responsible for countering crime, corruption, income tax violations, and money laundering in order to go after and arrest political opponents, including ministers, chief ministers, and legislators. And the use of governors, I think one of the worst examples, or 2 of the worst examples are the governors of Tamil Nadu and Kerala, who function openly as agents, crude agents of the ruling party. So it's no wonder that in opposition-ruled states, every attempt is made to squeeze their finances, put pressure on their finances, particularly governments that have intervened in a big way, left-party governments or left-led governments that, or non-Congress, non-BJP governments like the DMK that have invested heavily in the social sector. Kerala is the most important example, model for this, and its finances, its stress finances are partly the result. I read about this in various papers. It's heavy investment in the social sector, which is not taken into account. There are many issues that have been brought to our notice, brought to the fore in scholarly papers, articles in the press by various people, including R. Ramakumar of the Tata Institute of Social Sciences. Newspapers have written about how cess and surcharge collected by the union government is now estimated to be around 23% of its gross tax receipts for 2024-25, and this does not form part of the divisible pool, not shared with the states, and the and on every front, the opposition-ruled states are being pressured. The most recent budget provided a shameful example of discrimination against states that need a better share of taxes collected. So there are various demands made here, ways forward that have been, reforms suggested that the states generate around 40% of the revenue and bear around 60% of expenditure. And the Finance Commission and its recommendations are meant to rectify this imbalance. The contrary has happened, and so the suggestions include the suggestion that the divisible pool can be enlarged by including some portion of cess and surcharge in it, because the states get nothing out of it. Weightage for efficiency, criteria and horizontal devolution should be increased, and then create a more formal arrangement for the participation of the states in the Constitution and working of the finance commissions. These are some of the reforms. I don't want to go further into the details. But I just want to make the point that the attack on federalism and the attack on the revenues, the finances of states that do not belong to the ruling coalition, do not obey the dictates of this authoritarian government and leader, I think this is very much part of a wider assault on democracy and people's rights. Thank you.
Thank you, Ram. It's already 5:47 now, so you're very much on time. Let me just try to provide, because as Sashi said, Thomas Issac doesn't really need an introduction. But since I've been asked to provide something by way of an introduction, I shall do so. And I would also like to, I plan to give myself a maximum of 10 minutes. And the rest after that, the floor is Isaac's. I'll also put this in some historical perspective within the limited time that I have. Thomas Issac is a man of many parts. He's widely known. We have traveled together both as economists and as fellow activists of the People's Science Movement. He's been a key figure in the Kerala Shastra Sahitya Parishad from early days. And one of the most innovative interventions that Issac spearheaded was the People's Plan experiment in Kerala, which to this day has had a very significant effect, and you will see nowhere in the country elected local bodies which are strong and competent as in Kerala, across the country. And so that's why they're also able to respond to crises and disasters in a far more participatory manner than most other states do. So I think it's important to recognize the distinctive contribution of the Kerala experiment, and in particular Issac's role as a part of the planning board earlier and then later as finance minister. I had the privilege of being associated with the planning board when Issac was first time there with Professor Gulati, and subsequently as well. We've also been together on literacy campaigns and other mass movements across the country. Issac is a product of, formally his PhD is from JNU, but his guide was someone that we both have great regard for, Professor Krishnaji. Is no more, but he did some very important work right from his doctoral days. So obviously we don't have time to go into all the things that Issac has done, and is almost always doing something that, he's been very prolific in writing, both in English and in Malayalam, by the way, and lots of books have come out. Some of them have been translated into other languages. Bharati Puttakalayam has translated some of Issac's work into Tamil, and Issac's journey ahead, I'm sure, will be as fruitful and as inspiring as has been his journey so far. So I'm delighted that Issac is here with us, and look forward to you all benefiting from his extraordinarily rich experience on the ground, as well as theoretical knowledge of the whole issue of center-state relations. Now, Issac will be talking mostly about the present, but I think it's important to recognize that, and Neve Ram pointed that out in saying that the previous regimes have also been quite unfair when it comes to center-state relations and have tended to centralize matters a great deal. The constitution itself is quasi-federal. It gives a lot more powers to the union than it does to the state, as a matter of fact. But one thing we forget, and this is particularly striking when you look at the current dispensation, our states are fairly big entities for the most part. Tamil Nadu has a population of around 8 crores. They're not small, the size of Germany or France or Britain. We have an elected legislature here, not appointed by Delhi, elected by the people of the state. And that elected government has practically no right to tax. Pretty atrocious. This is unheard of anywhere else in the world. So you have elected governments which have no right to tax. We talked about no representation without taxation, no taxation without representation. Now we have no representation, no taxation, all powers are with the center. So I think it's important to see the change that has occurred with the GST and the way it's being implemented, which has led to a very strong bias against the states and their ability to take decisions on crucial matters. And states can now decide at best excise duties. They can decide commodity taxes for diesel, petrol, tobacco, and alcohol. That's it. All the rest is in the hands of the GST Council, where the role of the states is less powerful than that of the center, practically speaking. But apart from that, the 30-odd years of liberalization, neoliberal policies, also have a very important impact on the center-state relations, because they have tended to centralize many decisions. And what is often not noticed is that when the union budget provides concessions to the corporate sector, for example, as they did, in fact, this is done outside the budget in 2019, October, when the present finance minister was also finance minister then, and she lowered the corporate tax rate from 30% to 22%. And by her own admission, this would entail a loss of 1.45 lakh crores annually, bulk of which would of course be borne by the states, because it's not like the center gets to keep all of that. This is part of the divisible pool. So essentially, when the center takes a decision to lower corporate taxes, it hurts the states. Also, it forces states into competition with one another to try and attract investment. So, many of these issues have been pointed out, particularly in a very important document way back in 2008 by the CPIM, which drafted a very elaborate memorandum on center-state relations. A very comprehensive document. I don't have time to go into all of that, but essentially to say that the 30 years of liberalization, and then of course this particular regime's extraordinarily, indefensible actions like the demonetization, have all hurt both the states and the unorganized sector of the country, the informal sector of the country. Essentially hurt the small producers, the workers, the working people. So there are larger issues, but today we will be able to see how ostensibly, if you just say we have neoliberal policies, so we are not centralizing everything in government, but in fact we're centralizing all powers in the union government, essentially making states very subservient to the union dispensation. I don't know how many of you are aware of this. When the COVID hit us, states were being forced to borrow at extraordinarily high rates of interest to deal with their unanticipated expenditures, and this is constantly happening. We are willing to, forgive the shenanigans of our chiefs of financial institutions in this country, but we are very harsh on the states. That's the way the dispensation works. And I think it's important to highlight the fundamental injustice of the system that we are dealing with, apart from the fact that Ram pointed out that in this particular regime, the last 10 years, there have been serious violations of the autonomous status of many institutions. That, of course, is a continuing threat. And the point that Sashi made about education. The new education policy is a scandal. It takes away rights from the states. Remember, the education was a state subject until the emergency. People have forgotten that. It has become concurrent and it's become practically a union list now, with the way the governors go around trying to appoint vice chancellors and so on. So, larger issues, and I think the general atmosphere is clearly one where there is an emerging fight by people of different nationalities coming together, if I may use the old-fashioned word, to fight against this kind of centralization that denies India's pluralism, its diversity, and the right of people of the states to have a government of their choice, at least in at least partially sovereign domains. And these are the important issues that underlie the overall political issues that we're dealing with. Isaac will mostly be looking at union-state fiscal relations. We used to call it center-state, but increasingly we in Tamil Nadu prefer to call it union-state, going back to the constitution and remembering its articulation of India as a union of states, not the other way around. Basically, you look at every field, and I've been saying this for 10 years now, it's just centralization all the way to ridiculous lengths. And I don't want to go into that because my time is basically up. I'm going to invite now 1756. Isaac will have a full 1 hour at his disposal. He said he would need about 40-45 minutes of presentation. We'll open the floor up for discussions, for questions essentially, not so much discussion. There won't be time for discussion. And he will have to leave at the very latest by 7 p.m. So keep that in mind. And I look forward, along with all of you, to listen to Isaac.
Good evening, everyone. Professor Athreya, N. Ram, Shashikumar, Nagarajan, and Comrade GR and Rangarajan. Dear friends, let me start from a very simple statement. In any large country, a federal system of governance would be much more efficient than a unitary system of government, for obvious reasons. I don't want to dilate on that. I would say all the more so in a multicultural country like India, where you can identify very distinct subnationalities with their history, culture, and aspirations. In such a context, I think it is very important that the federal system accommodate regional aspirations and the choice of development. Let's take the experience of Indian states. Already Ram has referred to Kerala. We have focused upon social sector development and just paid rich dividends. On the other extreme would be, say, a state like Gujarat, whose focus has been industrial development, with the expectation that growth will trickle down. In between, you have Tamil Nadu, where you started with industrialization, then there is very serious state intervention to redistribute, to public provision of welfare and social services, so that improvement in standard of living do take place. Then you have a whole host of Bimaru states who does not belong to any of this. Now, I'm not going to make a judgment which is better. My only point is that that's something that has to be politically decided choice made by the people in the region. And our federal system must accommodate these aspirations. Give space for set of fiscal autonomy to choose the paradigm of development. Now, the simple point I want to make is the present federal system doesn't. I will come back to this point towards the end of my lecture. Now everybody accepts that India is a quasi-federation. The legislative, administrative, and financial powers are concentrated at the center. Now, this is very true for financial relations. You will find the power for financial mobilization is concentrated in the center, while functional responsibilities are in the domain of the states. This basic asymmetry, states which account for about 60% of the development expenditure, they control only about 40% of the revenues. This basic asymmetry therefore demands a devolution of funds from center to states. The Constitution understood this, constitution makers. Therefore, you have the institution of Finance Commission appointed every 5 years, which determines, one, what percentage of central taxes, excise duty, then direct taxes, what percentage of that should be devolved to states, or the divisible pool, a term which is frequently used. 2, the Finance Commission also determines the norms by which this divisible pool is to be distributed between the states. Now, every finance commission, now 15 finance commissions have already submitted the reports, and 16th one has just been appointed. Every finance commission rouses a lot of heated debate and so on. Despite these differences, there's a general agreement that this is norm-based statutory devolution and cannot be easily changed by the sender. Okay? Therefore, this is an acceptable way of devolving funds. If you take just revenue expenditure, revenue receipts, devolution by Finance Commission would come to something like 70% of the total devolution. But if you add, say, loans and so on, then it would be much lower, 40%. Then, when we started the planning, another route for devolution emerged, the Planning Commission. Planning Commission was responsible to frame the national plan, dovetail state plans with the national plan, and also determine what plan assistance, plan aid has to be given to each state. That was also based upon a formula. It is known as Gadgil formula. Professor Gadgil proposed it. And also there was a lot of discussion between the states and the Planning Commission, which was clinched finally in the NDC, National Development Council. So it is a deliberative process that is involved. Now, third route is on the basis of an obscure Article 282 of the Constitution, which classifies miscellaneous financial powers, meant to be used very sparingly under special circumstances, but it was frequently made recourse to by the sender. This is discretionary transfer, arbitrarily determined by the sender. This was a relatively small share. Okay, this was the situation. Then in 1991, the whole paradigm of Indian development changed. Obviously, the finance also was not an exception. The composition of devolution to states dramatically changed. The biggest change was the Planning Commission was dismantled. If you take the Planning Commission, not only revenue support for the plans, but they determine the loans for the plan. They accounted for some 30% of the total devolution. So that now Planning Commission was no more. It was a discretionary decision of the sender which state would get what from this. Earlier it was not so. Now, mind you, there's a slight exaggeration in this, in the sense plan aid was mostly market borrowings permitted by Planning Commission. Now, under the new regime, states are no more given loans by the sender, but they take it from the market on the basis of FRBM Act, which says they can borrow up to 3% of the GSDP. But still, nevertheless, even after removing the loans, still it was an addition to the revenue pool which the sender could discretion give to states they like and don't give it to states that they don't like. Now, then comes the 14th Finance Commission. Already dismantling of the Planning Commission was on the cards. Everybody knew Planning Commission era was going to end. So 14th Finance Commission under Y.V. Reddy took a decision. Till then, finance commissions were concerned only with the non-planned revenue account. Indian budgets, unlike the budgets of other countries, has this distinction between plan and non-plan. Other countries have only revenue and capital account. Indian budgets have revenue, plan and non-plan. So finance commissions chose to accept that planned finance was to be done by the Planning Commission. We will confine ourselves to non-planned revenue account. But 14th Finance Commission realized the planning era was ending, and therefore they took into account the entire revenue account of the center. So then they said, okay, there is so much more revenue with the center. Therefore, we are raising the divisible pool, share of the tax of center, which was to be shared with the states from 32% to 42%. That is a major step. So they tried to squeeze away, take away some of the additional revenue that the center was going to get for discretionary distribution. But Modi would not have anything of that. See, while 14th Finance Commission was in operation, deliberating, preparing the report, he was the Chief Minister of Gujarat and was the most vociferous voice, demanding 50% of the central taxes be made into divisible pool. Of course, all of the states used to demand that, but was very vociferous about it. The elections came, he was elected chosen as the Prime Minister. Just then, the Finance Commission was about to submit the report. Now it is very well known. Ex-CEO of Niti Aayog, Mr. B.V.R. Subramanian, in a seminar by Center for Social Economic Progress, narrated how Modi met Y.V. Reddy in person, in his presence, and tried to say, no, you should not increase to 42%, make it to 32%. Y.V. Reddy said, you have no business in this, it's our business. He didn't budge an inch. And therefore, the whole thing came to naught. Of course, Subramaniam did not interact. Al Jazeera reported this seminar. And thus, we all came to know about this. Reddy have not made any remark. He has kept silent. That's a decorum of the commission. So what do Modi do? Now, Modi suddenly found the budget has already been prepared, drafted, thinking only 32% would have to be given, you see. So just the previous 2 days before the budget presentation, the figures have to be revised. That's a grapevine. That's not evidence, but that was the discussion. General thing. And Modi is a past master in improvisation. So he came to the parliament and he joked. Some states would not have treasuries big enough to keep all this money. And all BJP benches clapped and so on and so forth. So he made a great show of it, that giving away 42%. Then what did the India government do? They began a campaign to systematically reduce real divisible pool from 42% to 32%. How did they do it? Two methods. One, Constitution says net proceeds of the taxes. Net of what? Gross taxes minus collection charges. And that's what Ram Jesus gave me Ram Kumar's paper on that. And they arbitrarily raised that. That's one. Secondly, Constitution says these taxes will have to be shared, but cesses and surcharges don't need to be shared by states. Because cess is for a specific purpose. How can you share it? That is the logic of it. So, over 3-4 years, systematically cess and surcharges were raised. So much so, in 2011-12, cess and surcharges were 9.5% of the total tax revenue. By 2021, it reached 20.2%. And now in 23-24 budget, it is 14.4%, but still much higher. I'll give some. Now, many people say this is because of the GST compensation, which is very substantial. No, this figure is netted from the GST compensation. So, excluding GST compensation, this is what has happened. I'll just give 3 illustrative examples how it was done. In 2017-18 budget, the income tax rate of slab up to rupees 5 was reduced from 10% to 5%. Then to compensate for that, a surcharge on taxes on incomes above 50 lakh was imposed. Now, instead of surcharge, it was a slab rate change. States would have got 42%. So, a concession was given at the expense of the state. Then you impose a surcharge to compensate for that, which doesn't have to be shared with the state. Next year, 2018-19, the duty on petroleum, excise duty, was reduced by rupees 9. So you will think central government is losing the revenue. But then, by an equal amount, road cess was raised. So you give a concession at the expense of the state. Once again, you raise the cess. 2021-22, there was a lot of protest against price rise and so on, so some duty has to be reduced. Then what did you do? You reduced again 9 rupees from the cess, but did not touch the cess. So if you add all this together, the loss of states between 2015-16 and 2018-19 due to the shrinking of the divisible pool was a shocking 5.26 lakh crore rupees, not 1 or 2, huge. And if we calculate real devolution, then it would be 32%. So Modi achieved what he had set out to do. But he didn't stop there. He did something that was never done in the history of Finance Commission. 15th Finance Commission was appointed. One of the terms of reference was that to review the substantial enhancement of tax devolution made by 14th Finance Commission. That is never done. Specifically, to ask to revise, look into it. And everybody thought that something was going to happen. Luckily for the states, COVID intervened. COVID with the shrinkage of the national income and so on was the least appropriate moment to look at reducing the expenditure or reducing the revenues of the states. And therefore, they just kept it to 42%, reduced it 1% because Jammu and Kashmir became a union territory by then. Otherwise, they left it undisturbed. So, now, we will have to. So now what is a sum up? If a planning emission goes, it increases the non-divisible pool available for the center. Attempt of Finance Commission, 14th Finance Commission, to increase the divisible pool is thwarted. Therefore, center has much more resources at its disposal for discretionary spending. And therefore, new slogan of double engine growth. That was not in vogue anywhere before the history of financial history. Of course, central governments had some leeway, discretionary power. They would help the states with the political, but it was never made into a slogan here. So, double engine growth. There cannot be more obnoxious form of political favoritism in the devolution of funds to state government. And became very normal for the Prime Minister before every election to visit the states and may declare packages or on such other occasions. The budget of 24-25 has taken the slogan to a new toxic level by allocating special funds for two states, Bihar and Andhra Pradesh. There are a lot of debates about how this much money is going to come, but 45,000 crores of rupees, a big thing. And finance minister, okay, has no qualms, no shame to go on dilating the budget speech, a paragraph each for this. So, very rightly, this budget has been characterized as a save the chair exercise by the opposition. Now, this open political discrimination has opened a new front in the center-state confrontation. That's the thing. That confrontation is going to come in the 16th Finance Commission. How is it going to be? One, a point has been made that cesses and surcharges will be made into the divisible pool. Net proceeds of tax limits will have to be put. Or, much more simpler, much more simpler way, raise the share of taxes for the state to 50%. Now this is going to be an issue because center is flaunting that they have resources left for discriminatory transfers, arbitrary transfers. And therefore this minimum acceptable thing that there must be certain objective criteria by which resources are transferred. Secondly, there is going to be a big debate regarding interstate distribution between the states. That has always been there, okay. Each state has its interests, but this time this is going to be a serious confrontation issue. Why? For two reasons. See, any system of devolution will have to have a principle of equity. We are all one nation. Therefore, every citizen in the country has an inherent right to enjoy a basic minimum standard, basic facilities. And the Finance Commission is an instrument to ensure that. I will not debate that, never. But can you raise this redistribution to an unsustainable level? Unsustainable, I would say, a level which will affect the growth of the advanced economy from which redistribution is taking place. If you want the numbers, it would be something like this. For the money, resources collected by center through tax from the states, what percentage comes back to the state? Maharashtra, it is only 10%, Karnataka 15, Haryana 18, Gujarat 28, Tamil Nadu 29, Telangana 43, Andhra 49, Kerala 57. At the other end, you have states which receive the double the amount of resources that is taken from those states. I will start with Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Madhya Pradesh, Assam, UP, Bihar. Bihar gets 7 times the resources that is collected from Bihar. This inequality has been widening, and former Finance Minister of Tamil Nadu has the one who first opened this issue up. And the GST Council just is refrain. Now, if you have been transferring resources, but criticism of this transfer would be, it has not helped the states. Say, you take, now I hope you follow this argument, average per capita income of India, national average per capita income. This, say, weighted redistribution in favor of backward states is to enable them to catch up with the national average. But after 1991, what has happened? It's astounding. The development experience in India, I'll just give the numbers. Bihar, in 1991, per capita income was 56% of national average. Now, in 2021, is 29%. UP, it was 78%. Good, UP was catching up. And now, it is 42%. MP, Madhya Pradesh, slips from 83 to 71, Odisha to 81 to 71. Rajasthan is the only Bimari state where marginally improves from 75 to 79. Otherwise, all the backward states slips down in per capita income from the national average. What is happening in the advanced states? Haryana rises from 145% in 1991. Now it's 157% from the national average. Karnataka from 93% to 151%. Tamil Nadu from 92%, below the national average in 1991 to 143%. Gujarat 119 to 142. Kerala 93 to 133. The regional inequality, never in the post-independence period, has been widening in this way. It's like a funnel here, widening away. Which shows that redistribution alone is not going to bring about bring down regional inequality. It may harm the growth in the advanced states. It has to have some policies. But you must understand, what's happening after 1991? Market forces are having a higher say in the determining the economic evolution, not planning. So, what is this impact of this market paramountcy on the backward regions? They would be the victims of what in development economics is called backwash effect, you see. It's okay, you go and build a big steel plant, huge investment in Bihar. Now, all the contractors will be from Maharashtra or Gujarat. Better now, all the contractors from Gujarat. All the equipments, this, that, everything would come outside. Technical hands would come from outside. So the multiplier impact of the investment in the steel plant will be felt outside the region. In the region, there's hardly any impact made on the economy, you see. The market will just suck away the resources suspended the two advanced regions. It will get reflected, say, in the credit deposit ratio. It will get reflected in the trade. If you look at trade balance in mid-70s when I worked, very strange phenomenon. All the backward states, they had trade surplus. All the advanced states had trade deficit, you see. It's something like this, if you want to understand this, the analogy of colonial India. Colonial India had a trade surplus. It was a side of a reflection of its prosperity. It was a drain that is taking place. So there are these economic forces. Now, how do you meet this? You cannot control market. That's outside the policy regime. So you have to choose to invest on non-tradables here. What is non-tradable? Education, healthcare, other social sectors. Despite these resource transfers, if you take the quality of life index for any of these states, they're the worst. So without these policy changes, this situation is going to worsen the form. And now, at this point, I want to revert back to the statement I made. That federal fiscal system must accommodate regional aspirations. Okay. The aspirations, policies there will have to change. So also take into account of the challenges that advanced states are making. I will state something of Kerala experience, take another 10 minutes or so, and then show how this federal finance system, as it is evolving, has become a total hindrance to the regional development of Kerala. As you know, Kerala's development has been emphasizing redistribution. Redistribution through higher wages, redistribution through land reform, public action of people intervening. And also people's struggles for education, healthcare, etc. Every government, whatever be the government, they have been forced to spend more and more. And as a result, so many generations of people had a decent life, life with dignity. All right. But now, the children of these people who are now protected under social welfare and so on, they're educated, their aspirations have improved, they want decent jobs. Some job won't do. Kerala has the highest unemployment, but we have 3 million people from outside working in Kerala, migrant workers. But the educated, unemployed, the existing jobs don't meet their aspiration level. So you have to create new quality jobs. And for that, you need to have certain core sectors where Kerala can be competitive, focus on them. Knowledge industries, skill-based industries, and so on, and high value added resource industries. For the investment to be attracted to Kerala, there are many barriers. One key barrier is Kerala's infrastructure deficit. Because of your focus on education, healthcare, and so on, your public expenditure has been going into the sectors. And if you take the average capital expenditure of Kerala budget is nearly half the national state's average. Not just recent year, for a few decades. So you will find the cars and trains in Kerala will ply at half the average speed outside. You bring electricity, but you can wheel it in Kerala because you don't have any high tension transmission line above 240 or something. You have only port of Kochi, but loses out totally to, say, Thoothukudi and Mangalapuram, and so on and so forth. Your all industrial parks are of industrial estate vintage of the 70s. Now, this has to be overcome now, not sometime in the future. If we want to make this transition of a new development paradigm, of protecting the social welfare gains, at the same time generating quality jobs in Kerala, you have to overcome this infrastructure deficit immediately. So now this is the new regional development goal. Just like our regional development goal, which we chose very differently from rest of India to focus on social sectors. Now this is the objective. But it requires money, financial resources. So what do state governments in India do? How much state government can borrow is limited by FRBM, 3% of your GSDP. Okay, that's limited. And Kerala borrows, and Kerala is a huge revenue deficit because unlike other states, all the teachers in Kerala is paid by the state government, whether in the private sector or not, in colleges and schools. And you have big network of hospitals which have to be. In fact, the number of teachers alone paid by the central state government is larger than the total employees in the state government. And that's the kind of scale of this. And therefore, there won't be money there. So how do state address this situation? The simple way states address the situation of having the money and reaching the limit of borrowing is to have what is called annuity schemes. Okay, you want to build a big bridge, then you tell the contractor, we won't pay you immediately, you have to borrow and construct it. We will give you in annual installments spread over the next 20 years. So while contracting, you take into account the interest on the money you borrow and you participate in the tender. This is called annuity schemes. These are used by all states, even central government. Now, we examine this data when I became a minister, stunning. The implicit interest rate was between 12% and 20%. Because there are only few contractors who can borrow hundreds of crores and compete. Therefore, there is no competition. Only one contractor comes or two contractors. They have an adjustment and they jack up the contract price. So we thought, okay, instead of going to individual contractors, why not set up an institution or one company? Kerala Infrastructure Fund Board, which will borrow from the market and construct, and government pay it an annuity. annuity was defined in the law as 50% of the motor vehicle tax. So this new company can go to market and say, look, here is our future income flow from the government of Kerala. On that security, take the loan. It's an efficient company. So good rating. In fact, there was no need to go abroad to borrow. We went for masala board. So ED is after me for this masala board. So people ask me, why did you do that? Just to demonstrate to the financial market, here is a player in the market that can borrow from international market, issue a bond and get the money. Just to do that. So it was done. Okay, about 80,000 crores of infrastructure is being built. Only infrastructure, not a pie of this money can be used for revenue. It doesn't enter the government accounts at all. Then central government comes up. No. This is indirect borrowing by the state government. Therefore, it is borrowing by the state government. Therefore, we are going to, you have trespassed the FRBM Act. Therefore, this borrowing by KIFBI will be reduced from your normal borrowing. So instead of 3%, we will be allowed to borrow 2% only for, coming, how many years, I don't know. So that's become a big financial crisis. A sudden drop of 1% of borrowing makes a big problem in the state. While the central government off-budget borrowing is something like 5 lakh crores, it is not counted as part of public debt of the center. It does not enter into fiscal deficit. Take Nahai. It borrows. It's a hybrid thing. Annuity is something hybrid. But there are institutions like that. We can do, you can't do. FRBM Act, it has been passed. Central government never adhered to it, not once, one single year. Even the current year, it is, they are saying 4.9. They are supposed to borrow only 3% here. But they're coming with hanger on tongs against the state government. You are trustworthy. Which state government? State governments as a whole has complied. In fact, state governments borrowing is less than 3%. Many state governments have internalized this FRBM Act so much that even the COVID time, money borrowed, India government allowed to borrow you higher amount, 5%. So many borrowed. But then the principle of FRBM Act is you cannot spend borrowed money on revenue expenditure. Therefore, do you know what was done? They didn't spend. At the height of COVID, 3 lakh crores of rupees were lying in the treasuries of state government, and central government immediately takes them and puts them in, not central government, RBI takes them and puts into central government securities. People are happy, you get at least 3%. Lying in the treasury, you don't get anything. It is not that states are all borrowing left and right, and therefore it's the state, central government which is breaking the law. But they're trying to discipline the states. A major threat before the state governments is FRBM Review Committee has said that state need to, their borrowing power should be reduced to 1.75% here. See, they just don't see a role for the state in the development. Because center can then borrow more. To accommodate higher central borrowing, reduce the state borrowing. So what is going to be? It's going to be a big fight here. Constitution says state will have to take permission and conditions of sender if they are indebted to sender. Suppose Kerala says, we'll pay back whatever you have. Maybe maybe some 5,000, 6,000 crores. I told you, from 1991, center has stopped giving loans to states. But keep the center states indebted. They come out 1 lakh rupees for 50 years. So that you're indebted. So suppose Kerala takes the position. Well, we'll pay back. Then we'll go to the market. Anyway, you are standing for market economy. We'll accept the market discipline. No to your arbitrary decisions here. A fight is going on in the Supreme Court, you see. So, this war is high is hybrid. We will make our institution hybrid. Okay, we will see that toll is collected. Now, are you going to discriminate against us? So this is the fight that is going on. That's why I said, it's not the center-state differences, a confrontation is on the card. States like Tamil Nadu, Kerala, I don't know who else, a lot of them think similar. There will have to be a federal front to protect the rights of the state. Thank you very much.
This is Ms. Nagarajan. அவர் வந்து பாரதி புத்தகத்தினுடைய பொறுப்பாளர். அவர் தான் வந்து இந்த நிகழ்ச்சியை அமைப்பதில் பெரிய ஒரு ரோல் ப்ளே பண்ணிருக்காரு. He is gifting books from பாரதி புத்தகாலயம். என்ன புக் அது? This is about one of the early communists of the Madras Presidency, the great Singaravela, being given to Isaac. Singaravela was the man, first one to raise a red flag on May Day in Chennai in those days.
Good evening, sir. My name is Vaishnavi Kastural, and I have a question for you today. In your speech, you had clearly mentioned that the market forces have a great impact in the economy today. Do you think the recent Hindenburg report is entirely credible? Because it appears that the report is designed to destabilize the Indian economy and capital markets and fuel and create chaos and to unseat Modi ji. And even in the recent tweet, you clearly mentioned that the SEBI chief must, step down. I would like to say that Hindenburg clearly has a financial stake in the Adani Group's decline. Do you think that the Hindenburg report is objective? And do you think that stepping down of the SEBI chief is actually the way forward?
Okay. Original Hindenburg report about that certain shell companies have been used for round-tripping money to influence the share market prices of Adani. Okay. Nobody has refuted it. There is no earthly way of economic science to explain the inflated share prices of Adani. So that is going on, fight in the Supreme Court. SEBI is looking into it, but never coming out with a reply. But now, the present report of Hindenburg clearly establishes the regulator has a conflict of interest. She had a dealing with the shell companies which were helping Adani. See. Now, this is a very serious matter here. Nobody in India knew about it. Where was it disclosed? So, that's a very serious matter. Already, share prices are down for Adani share prices once more. Of course, a lot of people are foo-fooing it, but I think it's a very serious matter. It shows how our regulatory mechanism become totally corrupt here. Politically determined, not independent regulator. Yeah.
Good evening, sir. Myself, Tanishka, and I have a question for you. Sir, you explained about how per capita income is in a decline in the backward states. I want to ask that, is it mainly because of the migration that happens from these states to the developed states? Because you can see that a lot, majorly UP, Bihar, Chhattisgarh, these states perform as a labor cities for bigger states like Maharashtra or Tamil Nadu or Kerala. So is it migration major cause because of the decline in the per capita income?
Just think of the situation. There was no internal migration.
Yeah.
It would have been explosive. The whole Northeast India, Northern India. This is a safety valve. It does not solve the issue. They cannot find gainful employment in the state. Development is to precisely to create such a thing. And therefore, definitely, it has eased the problems there in the labor-sending states. You see, stages of states change over time. For example, migration to Kerala was mostly from Tamil Nadu, say 30 years back. But you don't find any Tamil labor in Kerala anywhere. When people leave the state, per capita income does not decline. See, they're surplus. Even if they're staying there, they would be accommodated as residual labor or disguised unemployment. Therefore, their withdrawal is not going to make any collapse in the economy. Understand? The per capita income level doesn't come. But this is an additional remittances which comes into the state. That's how I look at it.
Thank you, sir, for the session. I wanted to ask about the center, criticizing states for using freebies and giving social welfare schemes in the form of freebies. So is states actually being financially irresponsible, or is it just center just preventing these social welfare schemes from being rolled out?
Look, there is no way you can differentiate between freebie, useless spending money, and something, social support system, you see. Say, school feeding program in Tamil Nadu. It was criticized at that time as freebie. But it created an environment for very rapid increase in the extension of enrollment in the schools. So they have to be judged in this context, you see. So there can be no law on this. It should be a political process to be determined. Somebody overextends and makes the promises. They will not be able to deliver it, you see. Then they will have to pay a political price. That's it. There is no central authority that can determine what is freebie, what is not freebie, particularly when they are also making a lot of declarations on the eve of the election. And finally, in this country where in the global ranking, you are the lowest everywhere, hunger, everything. I think these are very important support systems, what are called freebie.
You talked about union-state fiscal relationship, but in a national economy which is neoliberal and market-centric, is it illogical to assume that they would fund a welfare capitalist state like Kerala? Is it illogical to assume that?
Right.
Basic criticism of FRBM Act is, they assume one cap will fit everybody. It doesn't, yeah. India is a very diverse country. Conditions and aspirations of people are different. And therefore, you can't put the same law. I would say, I'm not being irresponsible that you can borrow any level and so on. So I have a very precise time frame. Okay, to come over this hump, we need additional fiscal accommodation to this time. That kind of accommodation should be possible. That's what I say. Now, does it conflict with the neoliberal overall strategy? That is the point I think you're making. Yes.
It does.
What I am trying to do, what we are trying to do in Kerala is, within the limits imposed by the system, we are trying to have an alternative to the extent possible. We push the system to the limit and see if they close it like this, we'll try something else.
Yeah.
So there is a perpetual tug and pull going on. That's how I see it.
Thank you very much. Now we are almost at the end of our session. Nagaraj, who's from the Bharati Puttakalayam, will convey a word of thanks.
அன்பார்ந்த நண்பர்களே, இன்றைய தினம் நடைபெற்ற மத்திய மாநில நிதி உறவுகள் குறித்த இந்த கருத்தரங்கத்தை வாழ்த்தி பேசிய தாமஸ் ஐசக் அவர்களுக்கும், இந்த கருத்தரங்கத்தை நடத்த உதவிய பாரதிய புத்தகாலயம் இணைந்து நடத்த நடவடிக்கைகள் மேற்கொண்ட ஏசியன் இதழியல் கல்லூரியின் தலைவர் சசிகுமார் அவர்களுக்கும், ஊடக மேம்பாட்டுத்துறை தலைவர் அறங்காவலர் என் ராம் அவர்களுக்கும், பேராசிரியர் வெங்கடேஷ் ஆத்ரே அவர்களுக்கும் நன்றி கூறி, இத்துடன் பாரதிய புத்தகத்தின் சார்பில் நன்றி கூறி முடித்துக் கொள்கிறோம்.
Well, he thanked people involved with this event, of course, particularly Thomas Issac, Sashi, Ram, and also me as chair of the meeting. I want to thank all of you for having maintained a very decorous presence here and for having asked some very important questions. Thank you all.